And as the search eventually resumes there in Surfside, once they deem that it's safe to do so, the images and the reports are all too familiar for victims and investigators of the 9/11 World Trade Center collapse. Nearly 20 years after the attacks, the remains of roughly 1,100 victims, or about 40% of those who died, still have not been identified. Our Samantha-Jo spoke with a woman who hopes that the lessons learned by 9/11 rescuers in finding and identifying human remains are being applied in South Florida.
I went through everything they are going through. I felt the same way, the grief, the loss, the shock, and not really knowing, what's going on.
First responders searching through rubble, photos of the missing, daily press conferences.
We had that picture and it was on an easel.
To Sally Reaganhard, they're all haunting reminders of the day she lost her son Christian, a New York firefighter who died when the World Trade Center collapsed, and of what is still missing.
What happened to my son, I know, and nearly his whole engine company, they disappeared from the face of the earth. Nothing to bury, nothing to memorialize. If you don't have a stone in a cemetery, it's as if you've never lived.
20 years later, the remains of roughly 1,100 victims, about 40% of those who died, still have not been identified. After 9/11, rubble from the Trade Center's collapse was brought to a Staten Island landfill so it could be examined for human remains. Reaganhard and other relatives of those victims charged the process was mishandled, essentially denying their loved ones a proper burial.
I don't want the people in Florida to have to go through what we did, and to make sure that none of these remains are inadvertently discarded, because if they are, then they will wind up like we are.
A Justice Department report said the city of New York did not have policies or procedures for identifying mass disaster victims through DNA analysis. It also said hasty or reactive decisions made during the initial hours of the 9/11 attacks caused management obstacles in identifying the remains.
We know that because there was so much volume of material going to the landfill and fresh kills and other places, that the time to search for smaller remains was not in place. It's important that we get trained individuals, particularly anthropologists, pathologists and stuff, to go into that material.
It's unclear to what extent officials in Surfside are following the DNA protocols outlined in that DOJ report. Reaganhard hopes whatever course has been selected, it's one that gives the families a chance for closure.
Once it's gone, it's gone. And I believe my son's human remains, with the rest of the over 1,000 people, were trucked out and disposed of. And that is really a tragedy for everyone.
In Washington, Samantha-Jo, Spectrum.